continue on with a conversation that we started last week,
Woo-hoo!
and then it spilled over onto the Boom and the Dynamite show, which again we said is available on Patreon. I've actually the clip. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, I urge you to subscribe. However, if you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, the conversation that Paul and Jeff had about women's wrestling is that part of the conversation is on the YouTube channel right now. The clip is doing really well because obviously it's a conversation that people are having, and now they seem to at least be having a more thoughtful conversation about it,
Agreed.
at least from what I've seen. It's nice that we've had people on our network kind of join in the conversation with us, and that's a really cool thing to see. And then it just worked out that Mel and I were available to do the Boom. That was not a planned thing. It didn't come together until the last minute, but it ended up working out. We were able to continue that conversation with James and talk to him about it and get his view on stuff. And then the Dynamite show also talked about it. Paul, obviously, he started a thread on the Wrestling Observer message board, which is somewhere I have and probably will never venture. So
I know
because I appreciate my mental health.
Correct. That's exactly correct.
I will default to Paul and let him handle that. And I appreciate Paul starting that conversation, and I appreciate him clarifying that I am not an e-drone. I don't even watch WWE.
Who wants AEW to fail?
Why would I want the company that I just think watch the most to fail? I want the women to succeed. That has been the entire point.
I think it's cute because people like Paul who are just like he said to me when we were in the Discord, he's like, that's frustrating to me because it couldn't be further from. He's like, it couldn't be further from the truth, and it's very frustrating to him. I know that Sam appreciates the backup.
I do. I truly appreciate.
It's I don't feel that. You could accuse something. It's if they're not white knighting us, they're actually supporting us. They're backing us up. They're not. They're encouraging
well, and I'm not there, so I appreciate
by having their own conversations,
which is great. That's the whole point of all of this.
I feel like we opened the door to allowing some men to have a conversation about women's wrestling without feeling so I can't talk about women's wrestling because I'm a man. And it's yes, you can. You should. You should. If you want because to support us.
Because they listen to you. That's why I said, when we talked about it last week, when men were chanting women's wrestling during the Athena Willow match, that is important because men's voices tend to carry more in wrestling, especially among other men, because when it comes from a woman, they usually think we're complaining or we're whining or we're bitching or we're this or that. And so sometimes it needs to come from a man where they will listen. Sometimes, just like in corporate settings where a woman will pitch an idea and then a man will say it and the boss is like, yeah, I like that idea, Ted.
It's never happened.
So sometimes, but I mean, they should be having this conversation with us. We're not shouting at. Most of us are not shouting at you. We're not trying to talk
in
down
our case.
To you.
I think that it's fair. We're not because I'm in no. I have no interest
trying to have a conversation and explain
at people. This has been one of the best weeks in terms of having a healthy discourse with wrestling fans of all walks of life. To having a conversation about, yes, we also want to see a strong women's this was supposed to be an alternative, and that includes
and you're doing the exact same thing that your competitor is doing,
and it's I'm interested, and it's interesting to me that you think about it though, it's Brad is the biggest Stardom fan in the universe.
Yeah.
Brad's a bigger Stardom fan than any woman I know.
Well,
anywhere.
Look at Scott. Look at Scott
Edwards. Scott from 5-Star Joshi.
Yeah, and Daza, who's not here with us today. Daza is also a huge Stardom fan. They are constantly, the three of them are constantly banging the drum for women's wrestling.
And our friend John, who was on with the art, he's TJPW. He just he's go watch that, go watch that.
Yeah, it's which is really cool. And so it's. Again, we're not having these conversations to yell and things like that. We want people to pay attention because it's been a problem since day one. It's only getting worse. And there are
you're doing data collection does not constitute somebody calling you some kind of like, it doesn't.
Well,
it shows the pettiness of those people where it's like, I'm doing this for like data collection to actually see what it looked like, what the picture of the program is, and you're just mad because I'm right.
Right. And that, again, this is how the whole thing started. Like, that's what I was explaining to Paul the other day, because he made the comment that he doesn't care if it's 4 minutes or 24 minutes. But the point is, when they're getting less time in the ring, then that is less time for a story. It is less character development. Like, that's been my entire point of all of this, has been more time for the women. It doesn't mean just I only want them to have more time in the ring. It's all more time on TV is the point. I want them to have these matches in the ring where they have time to tell stories, where they have time. And so sometimes they can tell a story in 4 minutes. I mean, that's what Jade was doing. She was running. Nyla did it for
the program.
That's what Nyla was doing for a long time. She was just running through people, which, if that's the story you're telling, because they kind of did that with Masha Slamovich over in Impact. Like, when they first brought her in, they were establishing her as this huge threat to the knockouts division, and so she was running through women. So it's fine if it's a story, like if that's the story you're telling, but you can't tell that story forever. Eventually these women have to eventually these monsters who can kill women in 2 minutes, eventually they have to have 8-minute matches and things like that. And so it's all about giving women equity and giving them the time, because this is something that women have had to fight for in wrestling as long as women have been wrestling, pretty much. Like, especially when your only TV broadcast that was accessible to everyone for the last couple of decades, because of the way they portrayed women. So then you have to undo all of that. You have to teach them that women are not a bathroom break, that they are more than bra and panty matches. They are more than mud wrestling. They are more than all of these things. And they were doing the best with what they were given. But you're supposed to be an alternative to that. So then give these women the time in the ring. Give them time backstage. Give them time to develop their characters. Give them time to tell stories. Give them something that makes sense. Like, we know Sheeta's whole purpose is she wants to regain the title. And then even Nyla pointed out, she was like, everybody talks about how they want Sheeta to have a title run. She was like, but the pandemic started, the world literally shut down during my title reign, and nobody's saying, oh, I want Nyla. She deserves to have that shot back. So that's Nyla's, reason for doing things. And so give them a reason to do something. It's just Nikki said, how is wanting longer women's matches equal to AEW wanting AEW to fail? I still don't get that logic, because there is no logic.
There's no logic.
That is, they want to rip apart anything that they can.
It's cherry picking what they want to hear. Right. And it's also essentially that person showing that, that they're afraid of that exact thing.
Right.
Like, and so if it bothers you that much, then there's something to it.
Right. And so Thunder Rosa did an interview with Doc, who was one of my good friends. He writes for Bleacher Report. He got to interview Thunder Rosa, and I really recommend reading the whole thing if you've got the time. I've retweeted it. I'll tweet it again. I don't think I retweet it under Powerbombshells. I think it's just my personal one, but I'll make sure to tweet it.
Once you do that, I'll pop it on.
It's a really good interview, but
I saw that it was up, and I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet.
So I wanted to talk about a section that she talks about, because Doc did ask her about women's wrestling and how, because she's been with her not being able to be in the ring, she's been doing Spanish commentary. She does the Busted Open on Fridays. So she said she's been able to kind of look at the wrestling business and the women's division from a different perspective, because she's not been in the ring. And so she does talk about it. And she said that one of the things that the article says is that she's been passionate about is increasing visibility for women's wrestling, not just for herself, but for all women and future generations. He asked how this could be done, and she said, Thunder Rosa said, I think one of the things that I always talk about is giving us the platform, an equal platform for all of us to shine. And that means more time, better storylines, and equity just in general. There are a lot of steps that have to be taken, and there are great matches that have happened and great storylines that have happened. But I feel like we can do more. We always want more. And I think that's the one thing I've just said that I've said just all across the board. And when we're all working, we're all working on it. And I've been reading a lot of my peers' books from the 1980s and the 1990s, and they continue to talk about more spaces for women and inequality in the workforce. And that's probably one of the main reasons. But again, when we have more women being represented in different parts, broadcasting as ring announcers and administrators in production, that's important too. I'm not just talking in wrestling, but in general. So, I mean, that she pretty much just nailed everything that I've been talking about for the last few years. So I appreciate, Thunder Rosa saying that. And I know that they're trying, the best that they can. At the end of the day, it comes down to Tony, and how he books things.